one of the things I've noticed is when you start asking yourself these questions, more questions always happen.
Yep.
And you still have to figure out those answers.
Yeah, and that's why everybody needs to. I think a lot of people talk about, oh, where do I get funding, and they come up with all these reasons why the business is going to be too hard to start. Like I shouldn't even bother.
Yeah.
And really, if you just start and you start building a business plan and you really get down to the nitty gritty of things, there's answers to all the questions.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a nebulous question of where do I get my funding? But if she were to ask me, where do I get $500,000 for my equipment, and where do I get $250,000 for working capital, and where's a good location to put this spot? Those are questions that me or anybody in your city like me can answer. I'm Scott Hess, tax and business consultant.
I'm John Barton, small business owner. Remember the tortoise and the hare? Slow and steady wins the race.
We started Turtlesmith to help people start small businesses, providing information and resources to small business owners and entrepreneurs.
Build a solid foundation and forge your dreams.
This is always annoying to ask, but if you're liking this content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way for us to get more followers and more people engaged in this great business content. You can also follow us on all socials at TurtlesmithOK and find us at turtlesmith.com.
Please like and subscribe.
What's up, man? A little bit of a change of host this week.
I know, man. My seat just magically moved over here to the middle of the room.
It did. I usually see you in the corner. Yeah, John is out this week. He is getting his new business up and running. Today, I think, is going to be their first night open.
Is it?
So he's swamped.
I'll probably run over there after this just to see how everything's going.
Yeah, I was thinking about swinging by too, but he was in chaos mode. I went by there yesterday, so I've been trying to think about just letting him be.
We've had a lot of rain the last couple of days too, so I imagine that probably wasn't too great for the process of moving pool tables.
Yeah, real hassle. They had to get them in the trailers, and they were covering them with tarps. It was a thing.
You know what's funny? My neighbors actually, I think they're moving out. They're selling their home or something. Mm-hmm. I haven't really formally asked them. But they had a construction crew over there the other day, and they were putting in a new concrete path from the driveway to the front door.
While it was raining?
Right before it started raining. And then that was the day that it was just pouring down like buckets and buckets out of nowhere.
Just ruined.
Yeah, they had to put up tarps and all that stuff over it and everything. It was quite the scene.
Yeah, construction's one of those tough ones to do in Oklahoma in April and May. Most people just take the months off.
100%. Well, I had a question for you today.
Yeah, I'm excited.
It is probably one of the most asked questions that I think I see out there as far as people looking to start their own business.
All right. I hope I have a good answer.
Where's the money?
The money?
Where is the money? How do we get funding
to
start our own business?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It really is. The most common answer to it is you have to pay for the initial part of your business yourself. So when I started in my little accounting firm, I had some savings, and I was fortunate enough for my mom lent me another little bit of money to cover me for a few months. But I just paid for it myself.
Yeah.
I scratched and clawed and, saved every dollar I can. I ate a lot of ramen noodles and cheap hot dogs. And, for years I had mac and cheese with no milk or butter, just the Kraft and water, real poverty.
Meals.
Yeah.
The struggle meals.
Yeah, it was tough. But that's how I got started. And a lot of people get started the same way. You just have to kind of bootstrap it. But there are a lot of businesses out there that it's not possible to just bootstrap, especially some big projects that you want to do. So the most common ways for people to get a startup funded or a project that's, outside the possibility of self-financing is investors or banks.
Okay. What are some of the pros and cons, just real lightly, of the two?
Well, so banks are standard. You get a loan for your house or your car or whatever through the bank. You can also get a loan for a business, but the problem is they're not super great on working capital, and you need to have a large down payment. Now, if you're starting a business, getting a loan through the SBA is the best. Small Business Association, SBA.gov. I think it's like Form 7-3 or something. We should pop that up at some point. But is the best way to get a small business loan to start. You submit a business plan to them. You tell them everything that you're needing, including the equipment, assets, working capital, things like that. And that's how you get your initial loans for businesses. They will approve it and then connect you with potential lenders, so financiers. So that's the best way to go about getting a small business loan through a bank. Usually is through the SBA, particularly if you need what's called working capital, which working capital's money to pay your everyday bills.
Yeah.
Banks alone will lend you money, but really only on assets, or you have to have collateral.
Yeah.
So like if you have
something in exchange
Right.
of value that,
Right.
or if something happens, we have something of value to reclaim.
Exactly. So, for example, we just invested in a business, Rhino Backyards, which y'all should look up. It's going to be kind of a cool little project.
Shout out to Rhino.
Yeah. We purchased a few $100,000 in heavy equipment, trucks, machinery, trailers, and stuff like that. The bank was more than happy to lend us money on that project because there's assets.
Okay.
If we don't pay our loan, they'll come take the money.
There's something there for them to come claim.
Yeah, collateral. Collateral.
It's hard. It's bad that you got to think about it that way, but you really got to think about it that way.
Yeah.
In business, there has to be something of value there for me to put my money into, that just in case things go south, I can get something back out of, so it's not a total loss.
Yeah. And typically with bank loans, you have to have 20% down. So, we funded 20%. You have to do that for commercial buildings or basically anything, including the SBA. You have to have a down payment. Sometimes they do 10%, but 20% is the usual. So that's sort of the con for banks. You have to have a collateral. You have to have a down payment. The pros are it's your money. You're still own 100% of the company, and you're just paying an interest back to the bank as a fee. Investors, on the other hand, they're going to take a portion of your company. So that's the negativity there. But the positivity is if it doesn't work, then the investor's out their money.
As I understand it, that's due a lot of times based upon, this is my Shark Tank knowledge coming into play here. A lot of the times those investors will own a certain percentage based on the value of the company. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really hard to value a startup. If you don't have any sales or you don't have anything going on yet, they'll take a big chunk.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're successful and you show that you can pay them back quickly, and you just need maybe a little help, or you're expanding and you need a little help to expand, then it's a little bit less equity. But if you're going after an investor to help you start your company, they'll take a big portion.
That's going to be a nice little chunk.
Yeah.
Probably something along the lines of 50-50. Is that uncommon?
It really depends. Yeah. It can be up to 80% of your company.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
Depending on how much risk the investor is putting in. That's really where it's at. The percentage of companies that I take is based on my risk outlay. So for example, for Rhino Backyards, it's very low risk. We put a little money down payment for some equipment. We put a little money into working capital. Pretty positive we're going to get our money back, at least, if not make a pretty good chunk. So we only took about 20%.
Okay.
There's other companies, though, that I've invested more substantial amounts, and I've taken 70%.
Because there was a bigger risk.
It's a much bigger risk. Now, I like to be a nice investor, and I usually give the people I'm partnering with an opportunity to buy my share out, so that I'll eventually own less. But sometimes investors are aggressive.
Pretty tough, pretty hard-nosed on that.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a joke from, I forget what comedian it was. They said if they were ever going to be a drug dealer, they would be a nice drug dealer.
Right.
Approaching people like, hey, man.
Yeah.
You want to buy some drugs?
Yeah. Don't ruin your life, but,
Scott's the nice investor.
Yeah. Well, I try to be, but sometimes you got to be a savage. That's how you make the real money.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a person rise to the level of success in investing in business without having to be a little cutthroat. If you're not cutthroat even within your own ranks, just the industry you're in, you're cutthroat against your competition. You're always looking for an edge. And so it does take a certain personality type, I think, to be in that position and make those good decisions.
Well, and you also just can't take shit, can't get stepped on.
Yeah.
You gotta,
people step on you if you
sometimes you got to smack somebody. Keep your position of authority,
Well, we got a couple of Reddit questions that we found
Yeah.
for some people asking these exact questions. The first one here is from a Reddit account, Bring the Food. It is just simply titled, Where do most people get the funds to start a business? Assuming you're not already wealthy and assuming you don't have any friends or family who can loan you money, what is the best place to actually go get a loan to start your business nowadays? And where do most people get it? I've always been interested, especially in people who manage to open restaurants or food-related businesses, knowing that it takes a lot of money to start, especially with rent, equipment, and everything. Was always curious where most people get the funds, but the question really applies to any sort of business.
Well, so for restaurants specifically, let's talk about that. There's those first three ways I talked about, and that's how most people start restaurants. We've had a lot of restaurants come through as my accounting firm, and I've helped them from varying degrees of little food trucks to higher end restaurants. The smaller mom and pop restaurants will oftentimes be started self-funded. A great example is the place here down the street, the Stray Dog Cafe that we got. They just put their money into it. That's all of their savings, their retirement they put into opening that restaurant. And so most people will self-fund that kind of thing. An SBA loan is also a great solution if you're looking to start a restaurant or a small business like this, because you're going to need the equipment, which is very expensive. The SBA happy to help you get funding on that because there's collateral, like we've talked about. And they can also help you get a little bit of working capital to get you through that first 6 to 8 months before you start making money, when you're paying rent and employees and you're struggling.
Yeah, you're not making very much money yet, but you have a lot going out.
Yeah, so that's pretty typical for smaller end restaurants and stuff like that. Bigger restaurants, big chains, or like if you're one to open 3 or 4, or you open a very nice restaurant, that is usually an investor. There are restaurateurs, entrepreneurs, but restaurateurs, or something like that. Yeah. That fund restaurants. They really like to invest in restaurants. They know the restaurant game. They understand how to make money, and they really like investing in restaurants. So that's what you find.
Yeah.
You find somebody who's kind of in that space that's got some extra money and believes in your idea. Restaurants specifically, especially higher end ones, tend to follow chefs mostly. Guys want to invest in the chef. They want to invest in who's the person running the kitchen, because that's who's getting famous now in 2025. You see them all the time.
I never knew before. When I was living up in Portland for a while, I was working at a museum, a science museum, and they had their own cafeteria catering department. It had a bar and everything back there, and I was their bar manager. But the chef that was working there, I didn't realize until then, like, how I'd never worked in a restaurant or anything before that had an actual chef.
Yeah.
And they make some good money.
They do. Yeah.
Like, when you're a contract chef, like, there's a lot of work that goes into it, of course, but that's a really good.
Well,
it's a really good way to earn some money.
If you're the head chef of a restaurant, you are there from 7 a.m. until midnight every day.
Yeah.
That's just your life is the restaurant.
Yeah.
I had dreams when I left high school of being a chef, and then I saw the reality of what they actually do with their lives, and I was like, I'm good. Pass.
It's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot. One of the things I did notice was that the chef would, like you said, they'd be the first person there, and then they go throughout. But by the time we got to the event and everything had already been sent out, and the chef had already gone out to meet the client and everything, then they were out of there.
Yeah.
Everybody else stayed behind, took care of the dishes and all that stuff. So at least they get a little reprieve in that way.
Yeah.
If I'm coming up with the menu, I don't want to have to bust the suds.
The real secret to restaurants, though, that I didn't know is all the extra stuff. You don't make that much money on the regular food. It's pretty
Really?
Low margins on just like the entrees. Restaurants really make money. High-end restaurants really make money on wine. That's where their moneymaker is. Other kind of like Chili's type restaurants, it's all booze.
Really?
Yeah, those margaritas, huge margins, and desserts.
I was going to say desserts too.
Yeah.
That's why they always push that dessert 2-3 times on you at the end of the meal.
Big margins on some of that stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I mean, it's usually some frozen piece of slice of pre-sliced cheesecake or something like that. Well, that for the box they probably pay maybe wholesale $8 to $9,
Yep.
but then turn around and sell each piece for about $8 to $9.
Yeah, they make a bunch of money on that. So there's certain things in restaurants and honestly in most businesses that there's a couple things that are like your mainstay that keep the lights on, and then there's a couple things that really make the money for the extra stuff.
Are these the things that probably? I wonder if these are the things that are like usually the most advertised.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. So, for example, I can give you for my business, our bread and butter, what keeps the lights on, keeps all of us paid, is our monthly business clients. We do all their kind of monthly financials and taxes and filings, payroll, all that stuff. That's what keeps the lights on. But that's not what, gets me a new truck once a year or takes me on vacation or really does stuff. What actually does is the clients who are behind in taxes. So what Tiffany's here, our attorney in the office, she's the one that makes the real money for the office that lets us do other things.
A little inside sauce for you guys out there.
Yeah. Tax clients who are in debt are the biggest money maker for us because it's a lot of work to deal with the IRS to get them fixed.
And I imagine it's like that. It's almost kind of like depending on the level of severity of the client or the case. Sometimes it can be drop everything, we need to hop on this right now.
Yep.
And a little bit of that probably gets weighed into that.
Yeah, just had one of those last week. So
Yeah.
I spent all last week working on one client to get her fixed up. So.
Yeah, man, you work some long hours, man. I'm usually the last one in the building unless Scott's got a case that he's really working down.
Yeah.
I feel self-conscious about leaving early sometimes.
Yeah. Fair enough.
All right, we got another question here. Basically, where to get funding. I'll let you take this one.
So Where to Get Funding by Miss Blondie with several E's there. I'm an esthetician. Is that how you say that?
Uh-huh.
I think I nailed that.
Yeah, I think you did.
I'd really like to start my own spa. I'm extremely good at my job, but I've never worked in the admin section in my industry. Aesthetic equipment and machines are not cheap. That's a very true statement. Those things are ludicrous.
Yeah.
Neither are the consumables needed to run a spa. Where do I get the money to achieve my goals? I've been Googling all over the place, and there's so much info that contradicts itself. Would anyone be willing to dumb it down for me and help me get this figured all out? I am just confused and can't figure out where to start. Well, where you should start is turtlesmith.com.
There you
and
go.
Look at our building a business plan phases. That's step number one. Once you go through all of that, you'll get to the kind of funding section in there where we'll talk a little bit more about all the different types of funding. But for this one, this is a classic example for an SBA loan. Mm-hmm. And there's also some great options. Not that I'm, gendering this person. I don't want to misgender them, but it does say Miss Blondie.
It does say Miss Blondie.
There are some great advantages for financing and even some grants and additional funding for women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses out there. So starting a company like this, it is not without risk and it is not without some serious money from yourself, but you can get the majority of the funding through banks and grants and available funding out there. So I would start with Turtlesmith to make sure you have a great business plan, because that's the real ticket, especially if you don't have any experience in the admin section. Mm-hmm. You really want to check out the steps to build a business plan. And then once you have that, you can submit that business plan to the SBA and they will be able to help you out and get your funding.
It's funny you just said that, because that's really, as I was reading this question along with you, one of the first things that came up to me was, and this may just me be assuming too much, but there's a couple of steps that we cover in that step-by-step thing. One of the things here is a feasibility study. It doesn't seem like this person maybe has all of the numbers. They know that they're not cheap. But, what is not cheap? What is, a feasible amount to start with and then build up to?
Yep.
And a feasibility study would probably be able to help them out pretty much as well, to get those numbers and make it seem like it's just not so nebulous and you can actually nail it down to, okay, this is exactly what I need.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. A feasibility study is one of the first kind of steps in our plan, just to make sure you can make some money.
Yeah.
And kind of get your head around what all I need to really get this thing moving.
Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff that comes into there. I don't know a spa from top to bottom, but I do know that there are different types of spas. Mm-hmm. There are spas that are just for beauty and pampering. There are therapeutic spas. There are post-surgery recovery spas and all this. So it'd be interesting to know a little bit more about what type of spa that they're looking at, and then you really can start to nail down all of the different things. Because one of the things I've noticed is when you start asking yourself these questions, more questions always happen.
Yep.
And you still have to figure out those answers.
Yeah. And that's why everybody needs to, I think a lot of people talk about, oh, where do I get funding? And they come up with all these reasons why the business is going to be too hard to start. Like I shouldn't even bother.
Yeah.
And really, if you just start and you start building a business plan and you really get down to the nitty gritty of things, there's answers to all the questions.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a nebulous question of where do I get my funding? But if she were to ask me, where do I get $500,000 for my equipment, and where do I get $250,000 for working capital, and where's a good location to put this spot? Those are questions that me or anybody in your city like me can answer directly.
Right off the bat.
There's no information that contradicts themselves. There's an answer to those, a direct one.
So one of the things that I also find is my problem sometimes is I don't know what questions to ask, or if I do know what questions to ask and I'm not getting them from Google, like she said, what are some of the ways as a tax accountant, if somebody comes walking through your door and they just have a few questions for you, would most accountants take time to do that consultation, or is there a fee normally associated with that, especially in like a let's say a big city like LA or something like that?
So if you have very specific questions of like, hey, should I form an LLC, or should I do this? Where do I get this exact funding for this equipment? Those are questions I'm more than happy to answer, no charge, and most accountants will probably answer, hoping that you'll use them.
Yeah.
But if you come in and say, I want to open a spa, what do? I'm going to charge you a fortune. I'm going to charge you an absolute fortune, because it's going to take a long time for me to go through all of that. And I'm going to have to ask you 300 questions. We're going to have to get all of this nailed out. There's going to be a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of numbers to put everything together, to then answer what really you should have come to ask me for is, now that I know what all this is, how do I get it going?
So it's just, you're going to take on a huge workload, and you should be paid for that, as anybody should. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So really, if you want to start a business, I know it can seem very difficult, but check out the steps on Turtlesmith or anywhere else. But the resources are out there if you know what you're talking about. That's the biggest problem that I think most people have, is they want to get into a business, but they have no idea about anything. And they hope that Google's going to spoon feed them it, and it doesn't.
There was actually some really, really funny, or not funny, but some really eye-opening replies in this, because this question is from a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. But someone actually put down in the replies a step-by-step thing to ask ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And it actually spit out some amazing results. So nowadays, this is 2 years later, but nowadays we do have so many resources out there that will answer the questions that we already have, and then maybe even give us some of the information to the questions that we don't know.
Right.
Because that's a lot of what starting a business is just figuring it out along the way, and trying not to make a mistake big enough to sink yourself before you can start making some money.
Yep. And to answer this question, where and how do I get the money to achieve my goals? That's her big question in this. The first question is how much money do you need? So that's what you should start figuring out. How much money do you need for all this aesthetic equipment? How much money do you think you're going to need for either buying a building or paying rent? How much are you going to need for your consumables, your payroll, your administrative? So once you put all that together, things click a little bit easier. Yeah. And then the question is not where do I get this money, just in general terms, the word money. It's where do I get this amount, and how can I get it? Well, then we can answer that much easier.
And one of the things you said during the first season that kind of stuck with me as well, always or account for reinvesting into your business.
Oh yeah.
Along the way, like when you make these projections and do these things to get these numbers to figure out how much money you need, also think about how much money you're going to need in 6 months, 12 months, to grow the business to the goals that you have.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to start off with, in this case, a spa with all the equipment and all of the consumables and everything like that. But you eventually want to grow this space to include more of those. Maybe if it's a spa, you want to upgrade the decorations over the time and make things a little bit better. So account for those things as well too.
That's a great idea. Something I kind of get poked fun at from other people I work with a little bit in this space of helping people start businesses is whenever I'm thinking of a business that I want to start, I always think of what my dream is. So I think of, okay, if I wanted to start a coffee shop, I think, what does year 25 look like?
Yeah.
Well, I want to own 10 shops and I want to have 50 employees and we talk, have all these different things at each shop and really be the best coffee shop in Oklahoma. But that's year 25. So then I think, okay, but what does year 20 look like? Well, maybe I only have 5 stores and I think, okay, then what's year 15 look like? And then year 10 and then year 5. And I just kind of backpedal my dreams into more of a reality. Okay, now if I just want the one shop, what does year 1 look like?
Yeah.
And then year 2 and year 3 and year 4, and then what can I get to? So I kind of like to think about it like that. Some people,
that's a great way to think.
They call me crazy sometimes when I work with other consultants and stuff because they're like, just think about what you're doing today, not 25 years from now.
No, that's a great, because I mean, if I know the end of the journey, then I know the right steps to take today.
Yep. Yeah, and that's exactly it. And so if I know the end journey, all of my decisions today are informed by where I want to get to.
Yeah, you're not as volatile in your decision making.
Yep.
With changes in the market or changes in anything. When we all just went through this crazy thing with COVID a few years ago that changed the way everybody kind of had to do business in almost overnight. And there are people who unfortunately lost their businesses during that time because they didn't have a plan to adjust and they didn't have a plan to weather it, because I'm not saying all of them, but having an end goal there in mind may have helped steer them a little bit more correctly during that time. And maybe they made the decision to scale back, or some people scaled up. Either way it went, but you were making a better informed decision for an unexpected time.
Yeah, I think having those long-term goals are very important for small businesses. Exactly for what you said. It helps you inform what you're doing. It helps you inform how you're going to manage crises, and stuff as they come along. But also, it gives you a reason to be doing things. You're not just showing up to your business hoping that you're going to make it that day, and hopefully you're going to pay the rent this month. It gives you a goal to kind of build towards.
Well, speaking of that, our goal was to just get through an episode kind of on the fly here, and I think we might have done it.
I think we nailed it. There's one thing I wanted to mention that we hadn't talked about is crowdfunding. Crowdfunding's pretty interesting now, especially in 2025, with the Kickstarter and stuff. In these current times, people get really excited about backing fun little projects. So if you have a small business that's creative in some way or delivering an actual product, crowdfunding is really a great way to go about it.
There's been a lot of successful campaigns, and I've actually done some crowdfunding videos and photos and stuff for people for some of their campaigns, and I can tell you that they really do well. And if you're going to do it, make sure you're showcasing a good quality presentation of whatever it is that you're trying to do. Whether that's from an idea to, like Scott said, maybe even a manufactured product.
Yeah, I had some friends who did some little models for like a tabletop game we play. They made it. They did great. It had 150,000 or something on their crowdfunding. Yeah, and delivered a bunch of great products to people. Made a little money. So those things really do work. You have to have the right kind of product for crowdfunding. Obviously, a spa wouldn't be great for
right.
Unless you're giving everybody $25 gift certificate or something. But
a lot of places do that though. They will do that. They'll say, hey, if you get in at either this time or this level, that there's certain perks that come with that.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a spa is the way to go. Maybe crowdfund a spa.
I mean, as long as it's on the up and up.
Yeah, fair enough.
As long as it's on the up and up. Practice with the right licenses and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that might be a way for this young lady to go if she hasn't already found funding 2 years later.
Yeah. Well, hopefully Miss Blondie has achieved her spa dreams and has one open.
Yeah, I hope so. If you do, Miss Blondie, reach out and let us know if you ever see this, and maybe you can send us a video. Let us know how it's going.
Well, I think we nailed that without John. Yeah.
John is going to be so happy and upset when he sees this episode.
Yeah, he's going to be
He
happy
likes to
and
talk
mad.
about money.
He really does. He really does.
But I think we did a good enough job. So you want to go ahead and close us out?
Yeah, please check out turtlesmith.com, especially if you're thinking about starting a business, and find us at Turtlesmith at Turtlesmith at all of our
Turtlesmith
socials.
OK.
And you know what? If you have a question, shoot us a DM on one of our socials or ask it on our Reddit deal. We will answer it.
Put it in the comments.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. And hey, this was fun, man. We got to do this again.
Yeah, right on. This is always annoying to ask, but if you're liking this content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way for us to get more followers and more people engaged in this great business content. You can also follow us on all socials at Turtlesmith OK and find us at turtlesmith.com.
Please like and subscribe.